after I hit the record button. All right, awesome. So let's check out our week at a glance. We are doing things just a slight bit different than we normally do. So we're just going to throw it up there. Okay, awesome. You should be able to see that. You can also just, of course, look it up on your own if you want to. Introduction to this week. So again, we're closing out this year, so I'm trying to give you some space for review, but I also want to go ahead and encourage you to do some review. I know sometimes it's hard to find time. If you don't have to do something, it's easy sometimes to go ahead and just, do what you can or whatever. But we want to try to change that up just a little bit. Okay, I want to give you some incentive to kind of get a few things done, to get things ready, to get kind of cracking, get working as far as you can, as soon as you can. Okay. Awesome. So let's check out a couple of things. Hey, Scout, if you don't mind tonight, would you mind not turning your camera on? I really appreciate that you turn your camera on sometimes for me, but I'm going to post this onto YouTube, I think. So so I just don't, faces and stuff like that. I'm sure people don't want to deal with that. That just makes it easier for everybody to check it out. Okay. All right. Awesome. So let's check out this here. So I'm trying to give you a little bit of a plan to kind of get things going. So assignments are due next Sunday as usual. We will have office hours this week, and I've opened up a practice test for you on AP Classroom, which we'll talk about in a second too. Okay, so we're looking at content topics today. We're going to be looking at Unit 1 to 2 during class time. We're going to record this and post it up, but it'll be there available for you. I have a little slideshow put together by somebody else that I like a whole lot, so we're going to go through that one just a little while. Otherwise, a couple of assignments. These again are just basically assignments for me to make sure that you're doing some sort of review this week. All right. So the Heimler Unit 1 to 4 reviews are pretty simple. They're each about 10 minutes long. And you're just going to answer a few questions for me in there. Okay. So there are a fair amount of questions, but again, the videos are pretty short. Shouldn't take you more than an hour, hour and a half tops. And that can kind of replace a little bit of your study plan for the week. Same thing also for these advanced placement videos. Now, I think these are important to watch, especially for you guys at home, for the homeschool folks, where I don't have as much, contact with you. You don't have maybe as much discussion or whatever that we can do together. These videos are made by the AP people. Okay, so this guy in the second video, session 2, his name is Mason, I think it's Lugaro. I don't remember how to pronounce his last name. Anyway, he was the question leader for one of my questions the past couple of years. So he basically is the guy who creates the question, he works on the question, he finds all the documents or whatever, he grades a whole bunch of initially, and then he trains all the rest of us to be able to answer those questions. So he's pretty good, right? I mean, like, the videos are maybe not as exciting as Heimler videos, but this is a person who literally helps write the test and grades the test and tells people how to do it. So his content is going to be pretty darn good, I feel like, right? So we have 2 of those videos this week that we're going to look at, session 2 and session 4, for just a couple different reasons. And you'll have some questions to answer for those. Those are longer videos, but you can work on the questions as you go through them. You can also, don't forget, because they're on YouTube, you can always put them at 1.25 or 1.5 or something and kind of scan them a bit, which is, that's fine as well. They have a bunch of other videos also. So they have some from last year that are unit reviews, and then they also have ones this year that are more topic reviews. So check those out as well. They're really great resources for you to check out. This week, we got office hours. Again, not mandatory. Okay, we are not required to do any sort of office hours if you don't want to, but I am opening up a few extra times for help each week between now and the test, as I've said before. So if you want to show up, and you can email me, like, whatever your problem is, that helps out a ton, because it means that I can plan on it a little bit. But if you can't do that, not a problem. Just come on and pop in. Had a great time last week talking to a student about some things that they were doing, and I hope it was helpful for them. I had a good time talking regardless. But this week's office hours are going to be Tuesday from 5 to 6:30 p.m. and then on Thursday from 7 to 7:30 p.m. So trying to move those hours around just a little bit. I know a lot of us have church on Wednesday nights, or we have like stuff going on Fridays and stuff, so I don't want to bleed into those days, but those are your opportunities. I will record those. No, I'm sorry, I won't record those. Those are office hours. So, yeah, you can come and check it out there. A couple of things this week I'm doing with my brick and mortar kids is we're doing some geographic reviews for the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to be doing like East Asia on Tuesday night. I'll be doing, I think, Africa on Thursday night. And so this is going to be in Google Meets. I can't invite y'all, unfortunately. But what I can do, though, is record those. So I'm going to record those also and post them up in that YouTube channel. So you can check those out if you want to. These are kind of just like a remix. So we're going to do like East Asia, Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, etc. So we'll kind of run through those the whole way. So it's a different way to look at the material, and hopefully that will potentially help you out a little bit. Okay, so those are some different options. Let's see. I posted a whole bunch of different review resources. We're going to take a look at that in just a second. Otherwise, we have one thing I wanted to mention up here, practice test on AP Classroom. So this is not something that you have to do, but it is something potentially that's very useful. So you can click on AP Classroom and take this test. It will take you a while, 3+ hours or whatever. So I know that that is a lot, and that's why I don't want to mandate it, but it can be very, very helpful. This is an actual test offered by AP, so it will grade the multiple choice for you, and then I can come back in and take a look at some of the other questions and stuff. And I know I'm behind on grading, but I will prioritize those just to give you feedback, so to make sure that you are good for the actual AP test. Okay, hopefully that will help out a little bit. Let's take a look at one other thing here, which is these AP study materials. Okay, so I took these from various places and kind of threw them all together. It's a whole bunch of materials that are all listed under AP study exam materials. So let's say that you're having a little bit of difficulty with DBQs, right? Well, you click on that button right there. You got a whole bunch of videos. You got a bunch of websites that help you out with reading and stuff like that to try to figure out what it is that you're doing. And they range everything from a simple formula all the way over to Emily Glankler from Antisocial Studies writes a DBQ in front of you in 58 minutes. So you can see exactly her thinking process and the way she does it. So lots of great stuff there, right? We also got unit reviews up here with a little bit of help. So for example, if we look at Unit 5, we have a list of a couple videos. These are all the Heimler videos listed in a playlist. This is going to be Stephanie Gorgiz's videos. This is Antisocial Studies. This is Jim Rhodes. I've posted most of these before, but here they are again in a nice, convenient little place. So you can check it out and figure it out, particularly if you're having trouble. Like I know we did Unit 1 over the summer. So maybe Unit 1 is a good place for you to come in and check it out. Okay. One other thing I want to mention also is these little cheat sheets. These things are fantastic. I did not make them. I forget what teacher did. I think they posted down here who it was. Yeah, I don't know, but they did do these other ones here. Apologies to whatever teacher it is that I got these from. I didn't steal them. They posted them up for teachers to use, but regardless, these are really great. They're like very short generally, and they have lots of like detailed information. So I know they're pretty small, but they will also help you out a lot too. It's kind of like a extra review book kind of thing that you can use there. All right, so a couple of different options and opportunities of things that you may want to check out that may potentially help you out a bit with the actual AP exam. All right, let me know if you got any questions. Otherwise, we're going to be checking out this slideshow today. Awesome. I hope you're all doing well out there, by the way. You know, one of those things that can sometimes be a problem is just sort of test anxiety, you know, so make sure that you are thinking about it, make sure that you are prepping for it, make sure that you are writing a little bit extra here and there. That's always going to be things that are going to be particularly useful. You know, get ready for it. Y'all are going to be great. It's not going to be a problem, but you got to make sure you know where you are, where you're going, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's check out. This is a slideshow prepared by the great Ben Freeman from Freemanpedia. He basically kind of assembled all the little pictures and things that he had made and put them together into this nice little slideshow for me to talk about with you. Shared it out to everybody. I like it a lot because it's way nicer looking than anything I would make. It is kind of small though, some of the writing and stuff. So stick with me if you have a question or something about it. Let me know. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we are going to just briefly talk about this little review of content, and then we will go through Units 1 and Units 2, maybe like 20 minutes or so. This is going to work best, honestly, if you have a question, like if we're going through and you're like, hey, what about this? That's going to be a really great thing for you to do if you can do so. Okay, so please try to help out a little bit, and do that for me would be a fantastic thing to do. Okay, first off, we're looking at our in review here of the first few units. Now we're not going to get to, well, we'll get to global tapestry and we'll get to networks of exchange today, but we are not going to get to some of the other ones. But these are two of our units, right? We got global tapestry over here and we have networks of exchange. But these two units are also going to form the first of our time periods. Okay, so remember we have 9 units starting with Unit 1 global tapestry and then Unit 2 networks of exchange. But we also have 4 time periods. That is 1200 to 1450, which is what this section is. And then we're going to have, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling too great today. Then we're going to have Units 3 and 4, which is going to be 1450 to 1750. Then we'll have time period 3, which is going to be 1750 to 1900. And then lastly, time period 4, 1900 until the present. So each of these are separately divided up into these different little areas. So what we're looking at today then is we're going to talk a bit about the global tapestry. We're going to talk about these networks of exchange and see what kind of questions you may have. All right, let's check it out. So First off, let's do a little geography from these different places. Now, this may be a little bit difficult to see, particularly if you're on a phone or something, but there are a couple of really important places for us to take a look at. You can see on the bottom down here, we got left to right, so we got our different regions: East Asia, Dar al Islam, South and Southeast Asia, the Americas, Africa, and Europe. And then we have sort of major events that are taking place within those geographic areas. Okay, so if we go from left to right, then we got East Asia. We, of course, have China, which is going to be this area over here. And during this time period of Unit 1, we are looking at the very, very end of the Song Dynasty in 960 to 1279. And then we're also going to have the Ming Dynasty that will rise up from 1638 until 1644. Now, we will also have the Mongols, but they're not exactly on here. And again, they're pretty big. They're going to have a whole big area, big space all the way throughout there. We also have Japan over here in East Asia. So we got the Japan, Kyoto, the capital. And during this period, we have what's known as the Kamakura shogunate and then the Ashikaga shogunate. Okay, and then lastly, with Korean kingdoms, we got two of those. That's Korea right there. We have Joseon and we have Goryeo during this period also. Okay, these are all going to be sort of related to each other in the sense that they all have like Confucian influence with each other. But we'll get to that in more detail in just a minute. A couple of others. How about Dar al Islam, the House of Islam, or the Muslim world? So all of that orange there is really going to be that area. So we got the Ottomans, the Seljuks, we got the Abbasids, the Mamluks, the Berbers, the Timurids, a whole bunch of different groups of people within that time period. Let's also not forget the Swahili coast down there on the bottom as well. So that's a little bit more Africa, but fits into here as well. We got Mecca right here. We got Baghdad up in the north, which is going to be one of the major centers of learning and the heads of the Abbasids as well. Next up, we got South and Southeast Asia, some of our major kingdoms there. So one of those is going to be the Delhi Sultanate, as well as eventually it will be the Mughals as well. Then you can see over to the right a few others. We got the Vijayanagara Empire. We got Majapahit, Srivijaya. We got Dai Viet, which is the beginnings of the Vietnamese state. And we also have the Khmer area there as well. Now, again, this is mostly important in this time period. You will sometimes see it referenced when we're talking about Indian Ocean trade networks. So you don't have to necessarily memorize every single bit of that, but still, those are some important places. For the Americas, a couple of them here. We don't need to know a ton of this. So we have Mesa Verde and Cahokia up here in the top left. No, that's not really that important. But the Mayan city-states, or alternately the Aztecs and the Incas, those will be pretty important in this period. Next up, in Africa, Great Zimbabwe, all the way down here in the south. That is going to be our major building, major kind of city that's down there in the south. A couple of other places we got Timbuktu. It is technically within the Dar al Islam because it is Muslim, but it's also sort of separate in the way that it is. That's the capital is Timbuktu. And then we got Mali, which is the name of the actual city itself. We got the Hausa kingdoms as well. We have Ethiopia also, which is a part of that same space and same area. And then going all the way up here to the north, we got a couple of important cities here. We got Paris, London, and Venice. We have this thing called the Hanseatic League, which is a trade league up there in the north in the Baltic Sea. We also have a couple of important places here: France, the Venetian Republic, and of course the Crusades coming from Europe down into the Holy Land. So a little bit of a map for us there on a high level political kind of thing. Let's take a little bit more of an in-depth look at some of this. Okay, looking at East Asia then first, all right? Generic, oversimplified overview. I love how Ben Freeman does this. East Asia consists of China, Korea, and Japan. Of those three, China dominates. It is the most important of these three countries and civilizations. Chinese culture spreads to Korea and Japan, which will take a couple of different things. First off, Buddhism. So a lot of the Mahayana Buddhism is going to move over into Korea and into Japan. We also have Confucianism, and that will change a bit depending on where it goes. Of course, it's very strong in China. It is less so in Japan and Korea, but still pretty important. And then, of course, the civil service exam. Again, really important within China, a little bit less in the other two places, but still a very important thing, trying to choose your leaders and choose your bureaucrats based on the civil service exam. So when the course begins, the Song dynasty is in control of China and an economic powerhouse. Goryeo in Korea was heavily in the Chinese shadow, and Japan was finally united under the Kamakura shogunate. You can see over there the way that China's map changed a lot over time. So we have, for example, the Song, which is that small empire down there in the south. It's the southern Song, capital at Hangzhou. Then the Ming will encounter all of those spaces, right? So the Ming will be a part of the Song as well. And then we have the Yuan dynasty, which is, of course, the Mongol dynasty up there at the top as well. So they're going to have an even bigger empire also. A couple of people you should know over here. We got Minamoto Yoritomi, the first shogun. We got good old Genghis Khan, who's the founder of the Mongol Empire. Kublai Khan, his son, his grandson, who founded the Yuan dynasty. Marco Polo, this traveler who went all the way across Asia and also inspired a very popular pool game. And then Ibn Battuta, the Islamic traveler, and Zheng He, the Islamic navigator guy, super important as well. A couple of other interesting things here. We got a couple of following terms here, right? So a lot of different sort of Chinese names and other things. Let's go through just a few of these and we'll see if you have any questions. Sui Tong Song Yuan Ming, that's going to be our major Chinese dynasties. The Grand Canal, of course, is that waterway that links the two major rivers and is so important. Skipping down a little bit here, Empress Wu during the Tang Dynasty. She was one of the only women to take the title. Well, she's the only woman to take the title of Empress, but the only woman to really rule China for any length of time. Don't forget Champa rice. Okay, it's going to help to increase the amount of people living in China. Foot binding is important, not because it's just kind of odd, but also because it is important to demonstrate the nature of Neo-Confucianism and its sort of anti-female aspects to it as well. Okay. Anything on this page that you're looking at that you would like me to go into a little bit more detail for? Remember, this is kind of an overview, bit of a reminder. Any questions? Anything here you want me to go into more detail on? All righty. Well, if you think of something later, feel free to tap in and let me know. All right, next up, Dar al Islam. Everyone's favorite. So again, 1200 to 1450. Our generic oversimplified overview here. It's hard to find a region more influential to global events, probably because it's in the center of all these areas. Politically, the focus on life after the caliphates, because the Abbasids fall in 1258. It means Mamluks, Seljuks, and Delhi Sultanate. So we're moving away from that big caliphate, that big unified structure of Islam, and moving instead to a more broken up group. So the Mamluks, the slave dynasty that takes over, the Seljuks, who are Turks, as well as the Delhi Sultanate. There are a ton of cultural innovations from Dar al Islam. A few cities to know. Make sure you know Cairo, the capital of Egypt, Baghdad, which is the Abbasid capital and the capital of modern day Iraq, and of course Delhi over there in Egypt as part of the Delhi Sultanate. So again, one of the things that's interesting here is there are women's rights. They're pretty good in the early time and Khadija's time, but over time they're going to eventually be eroded a bit. So they're going to end up being weaker and weaker as more time goes on. Looking down here on our left, we can see a couple of different important groups here. So we have the Mamluks down there in Egypt, right? The slave dynasty. We have the Seljuk Turks who take over after the Abbasids, though they're going to have some Mongols coming their way in just a minute. We got the Ottomans, who are also going to be creating their empire here around the area of Constantinople. The Delhi Sultanate down here in Southeast Asia, we'll cover a little bit more later. We have Islamic Cordoba, which is a part of Spain over here. And of course, you can see the Mongols writing in. They're just off the screen there, off that map over a little bit to the right. A couple of other things to remember here. I don't know if you can see her name down there, but Aisha al-Bayayuna was a Sufi poet, very prolific, important Sufi poet. We also have a number of other people to know over here. We got al-Razi, the Persian polymath and doctor. Ibn Sina, who's the father of modern medicine. Avicenna is the name that's often used for him. We got Nasir al-Din Tusi, the creator of trigonometry. Rumi, the Sufi poet. Good old Ibn Battuta again. This guy, Ibn Khaldun, who is an Arab historian or philosopher. And then again, down here at the bottom, you can see Aisha al-Bawniya. If you look over here on the right, then you'll see a lot of very similar things, some basic things about like Islamic world, for example, such as the Kaaba, which is the stone that is in the not the stone, sorry, it's the building that is in Mecca. We have Allah, we have Mecca, the important city, Muhammad, Quran, all kinds of things like that as well. Couple of things in here maybe we don't know as well. Qanats are like, they're sort of like, what do they call them? Like water kind of retention kind of things that are important. And really the reason they're important is that they show the power of Islamic creation, the Islamic, what do you call it? architecture, etc. And then, of course, we have a few other names down there at the bottom that would be good to know. Mawali in particular is important. These are the people who were converts or conversions to Islam from like Christianity, and they were sort of poorly treated by the initial wave of the Abbasids. And so as a result of that, they revolt, and that's going to bring in, excuse me, not the Abbasids, for the Umayyad, which they revolt and help bring in the Abbasids, who are a bit more chill about all that kind of stuff. All right, as before, let me know if you got any questions here, guys. Let's check out our next one. We're moving fast. Got a lot to cover tonight, but again, anytime, please stop me. Nothing wrong with that at all. All right. South and Southeast Asia then. All right, our little overview here. South and Southeast Asia are arguably the trade spot on Earth. So that whole area there of the Indian Ocean, lots of trade that's going on there. And of course, people are trying to go from China all the way over to Africa and back. And so this is the kind of area where you really got to be to make that happen. So this is also where you see a lot of collisions of different belief systems and other cultural things, particularly Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. South Asia, focus on the Delhi Sultanate in this time period. And Southeast Asia, you want to focus on the trade kingdom. So Srivijaya, for example. And also make sure you remember this thing about diasporic communities throughout the region. Okay, so diasporic means that they are a part of a diaspora. They have moved from one place to another, right? And so what happens then, a lot of Chinese will move to places like Malacca or somewhere, and they will live there, and they will create a new group, and that will spread the culture of that group into those areas as well. So if we take a look here, we can see a couple of different important places here. We got the Delhi Sultanate, super important. That yellow there is going to be the Vijayanagara Empire. Down to the bottom right, we are going to have the Srivijaya, which is super important, that kind of pinkish color. The Majapahit as well. Then we got the Dai Viet, who we saw before, and the Sukhothai group, as well as the Khmer Empire, also super important. Looking over here to our right, you can see a couple of terms as well. Most of these, again, are going to be location names. Angkor Wat is the name of that giant sort of monastery city that was built. Otherwise, one thing to remember, I think we did this article together, was Southernization. So this is the idea that culturally and in the world, that the world was really looking to the South in this time period, that the cultural creation of the South was in this period, and that the world essentially revolved around the Indian Ocean Trade Network. A couple of other ones. Bhakti movement, that is a change in Hinduism that goes from being the sort of Islamic group, like the normal sort of Hinduism that had a lot of different focuses and stuff. But when Islam comes in and starts threatening its power, then they not change it, but they modify it a little bit to move instead into these more personalized gods. So we end up having groups like Krishna and others that are more personalized in their nature, as opposed to the more generic function of the Hindu empire instead. All righty, South and Southeast Asia. Let me know if you got any questions. The only person on here that's not something mentioned is Zheng He, the Chinese Islamic navigator. Remember, this guy is a eunuch. He travels all the way down through the Indian Ocean and sort of like shows the flag at various locations. And as a result of that, he becomes very famous and so forth. So he does a couple different trips, but then on the last one, his trips are canceled because the emperor who he liked or who liked him died, and so they needed to have something else different instead. All right, nice and oversimplified. Good overview there of South and Southeast Asia. Let's check out our next little group here, the Americas. Now, we did this a little bit. We kind of not undercovered it, but we don't cover it as much. I also tend to do the Americas stuff when we do the European conquest of it, because it works a little bit better in that location. I just don't really see a ton of examples of these groups, like the North American Native Americans, for example. It just doesn't tend to come up a whole lot. So just letting you know, like, that doesn't mean that it's not. It doesn't mean that's not important, but we can kind of look at a few of these things to make sure that you know a few of these, but not all of them. Okay. So it says the map may not be super full, but don't skip them. From the Mississippians and Puebloans in North America to the Mexica and Mayans of Central America and the Inca in South America. Focus on the Aztec, the Mexica Confederation, particularly Chinampas, which are those quote unquote floating islands, but are a way basically to create more food than you would be able to do otherwise. Know about human sacrifice, of course, and their capital of Tenochtitlan. Also for the Inca, also known as Tawantinsuyu. That was terrible. Focus on Pachacuti, who is this guy down here, the Inca of the Incan Empire, one of the most important ones. The Incan road system, okay, the Carpanon, and also the Quipu, which is the knots that are going to be communicative. So you can see again up here, we got the Mississippian Indians with Cahokia. We have a couple of examples over here also of places like the Puebloans, but really the most important places we're going to be looking at are the Mayans on the peninsula there in Mexico, and also the Mexica or the Aztecs around Tenochtitlan. Then, of course, we have the Incas down here in the bottom. And so these important people here, I don't know who Urca Chile is. That must be a Ben Freeman original over there. It's kind of a cool picture though. And who wouldn't want a llama god? All right, let's check out over here on the right, a couple of things that you need to know. So again, at the top here, we got a few examples of some of the Aztecs or the Mexica. Aztlan is the name of the place they supposedly came from. So when they talked about, they did this migration very early in their history, and they made it all the way down to the place where the island was in the little middle of Lake Texcoco. And the place they said they came from was Aztlan. So it has a lot of historical, mythical significance. It's basically north of Mexico. Chinampas, as we talked about, were these very important places to grow food. What else we got? Yeah, I mean, other ones are pretty common, pretty simple. Mita system, again, is going to be that labor system that the Incas use in order to demand like forced labor from their people. And that is a important one. All right. Let me know what kind of questions you got. I love all the color coding. It's so nice. All right, we're whizzing through it, folks. Let's check it out. Let's talk about Africa in the global tapestry, 1200 to 1450. All right, here's our generic oversimplified overview. Africa is introduced to the global tapestry by the Trans-Saharan Trade route. Okay, we're going to talk about that when we get to part 2. The main focus in this one, though, is their links to the trade and also the rise and rule of the Empire of Mali. That is led by this guy down here, Mansa Musa. It was founded by this other guy over here, Sundiata Keita, the founder of the Mali Empire. Don't forget about Great Zimbabwe, which is the city down here in the south. The Christian state of Aksum or Ethiopia. This is where they have these rock-cut churches that are so important. And also the trading cities along the Swahili coast, which is a part of the Indian Ocean Trade Network, but it's still important. That's going to be like Kilwa and others over there on the far right. Don't forget a couple of different things here. So we got Mali, capital here at Timbuktu. We also have the famous Hajj of Mansa Musa. You can see the little coins that he's put in there as they make their way over there to Mecca, where represented by the Kaaba stone there, or the Kaaba building there. We are going to start to see, though, these voyages by Prince Henry right near the end of the time, where he's going to start kind of going around those areas. We also have this little state here called the Hausa states, which again are thriving on trade, but not as important as some of the other ones. We got all these people down here. We've talked about a few of them already. We'll get into more detail on the Trans-Saharan Trade route in a minute. Camel caravans are what's going to transport those goods across the way. One thing to remember is these Bantu migrations. So if you look kind of where Mali is, maybe a little bit more like where the Hausa states are, that area then is going to have a group of people that are known as the Hausa. I'm sorry, they are known as the Hausa, but they're also called the Bantus. They're like the traditional, like ancient peoples that lived there. So think like Slavs or Anglo-Saxons or something. This is a older group. So they have a variety of different tools and things like that that they're using that they're going to bring with them. And they are going to move essentially south and east down through Africa. They will settle through all these different areas. So modern day Zaire or Tanzania, places like that is where they're going to go to. So modern day languages in Africa and that bottom part down there are going to be mostly Bantu style languages. Great Zimbabwe down there in the bottom, a couple of different kingdoms there. Yeah, and a couple of the other things we already talked about, Timbuktu, Hausa states, etc., etc. All right. Anytime. Let me know if you got questions. Let's do it. All right, let's get to Europe now. Europe is red. All right. This is kind of interesting. It's one of the least important of the global tapestry. As it says, don't feel bad. Europe is massively important for all the other units, but basically medieval themes are what we're looking for here. So for AP World, we're looking at the versions of their civilization, like their governments, as well as their economic system, right? With feudalism, as well as manorialism. So remember the difference between these. They are mutually dependent on each other. They both work together, but they're also not exactly the same thing. People sometimes sometimes get them confused. Here's the best way to think about it. Feudalism is a political system that governs how the kingdom is run, and manorialism is the economic system that is the way that the economy is structured within the kingdom. They both work with each other, though. So, for example, in feudalism, the king is going to grant some land to a knight or a lord. That person then will organize a manor in that land so that their peasants and others will live on the manor and produce economic goods, but they're also going to be living under the lord, who is the leader of the area according to the nature of the king. Right? So in other words, feudalism depends upon manorialism for its economic abilities, whereas manorialism depends upon feudalism for its sort of political structure and organization. Right? But again, at its most basic, feudalism is a system whereby the king is going to give grants of land so that everything's sort of like individualized and spread out. So like the king does not have a lot of direct control over people who live throughout the country. Manorialism then is a economic system that's based around a manor. So the idea is to try to produce as much as possible as you can on the manor, whereas you want to trade for very minimal stuff, mostly like spices or things like you can't make on your actual land. But otherwise, it should be basically based around your little manor that you have there. Around this time period, then, we're also going to have the arrival of the Mongols in the grouping of the Golden Horde. We are going to have the arrival of the bubonic plague, and of course, the Crusades that are going to make their way over to the Middle East. A couple of important places here. We got in Europe, we got France, Republic of Venice down there. We got Byzantine Empire in the early phases. We got the Kievan state there, and then the light blue, and of course, the Golden Horde who will be making their way through there. Hanseatic League, Mongol invasions, Crusades, printing press, etc. A couple of groups, a couple people here to know. These are good travelers. So Marco Polo is this Italian traveler, of course, we know, who goes out to China. Marguerite Kemp, on the other hand, is a Christian mystic and pilgrim. She will move from, I think she's from France, but I know she's from Europe. She will go down into the Middle East, down into the area of the Holy Land in order to go on a pilgrimage, and she writes about her experiences. So we have a lot of information and details from that trip. Over here on the right, we got a couple of things that are related to feudalism. So vassals are people who are under the king. Same thing kind of with lords. Serfs are these workers. They're not slaves, but they don't really have a lot of rights. So they have the right to stay on the land and a few other things, but they don't really have full freedom that we would think of today, but nor were they slaves either. It's type of forced labor, basically. Knights, chivalry, fiefs, manors, all that kind of good stuff. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, Black Death also going to kill a whole lot of people in Europe. All right, let me know if you got any questions. That'll be about the end for us there of Unit 1, the Global Tapestry. All right, let's take a look here at Unit 2. So Unit 2 is about connecting the regions from Unit 1. What the College Board calls networks of exchange. So we're still in the same time period here, 1200 to 1450. We're going to take a look at the geography here that Ben Freeman has provided for us. And we, of course, have three major trade routes. We have an empire here. Then we got a couple of other little things, okay? So we have the Silk Roads. Those are going to go from China to Europe. We have the Indian Ocean, which is going to go from Africa to the other side over to Southeast Asia or whatever. And then we have the TransSaharan Trade route, which is going across the Saharan Desert, TransSaharan, right? So Ghana and Mali moving back and forth between those areas. And then, of course, our empire or kingdom is going to be the Mongol Empire. So this colorblind, like light bluish gray or whatever, that's going to be the size and the space of the entire Mongol Empire. Down here, you can see the blue. That's going to be our Indian Ocean trade. We got the, what is that, like brown, I guess? That's the Trans-Saharan trade, maybe like a dark green. I don't know. Please don't be mean to me. We got the Silk Road crossing across here in the red as well. And then part of this that we're going to look at in a minute is we're going to talk about some of the cultural and environmental consequences, which again is spread, right? So spread of religion from the cultural consequences of technology, et cetera. And then some environmental consequences. So problems with things like the bubonic plague and certain other types of things traveling around the world. All right, let's take a look at some specifics then. We got the Silk Roads, all right, our generic simplified, oversimplified overview. Arguably the most famous trade route of all time, the Silk Road. Again, it begins under the Han Dynasty in like the 200s, 300s. Will go, so they like actually traded with the Romans. It will go to connect east to west via a series of trade routes that collectively earn the name Silk Road. So again, it's not just one road, it's a whole bunch of different ones that met up and kind of move around a whole lot. Tons of trade cities emerged along the routes, major religions spread along the trade routes, major technologies, ideas, culture, etc. They're all going to move along this way. Taking a look over here to our right, we can see the people to know. We've already talked a lot about Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta, but Genghis Khan, of course, the founder of the Mongol Empire, he is one of the guys who's important here. Why are the Mongols and why is Genghis Khan important to the Silk Roads? Well, don't forget that Pax Mongolica, the peace of the Mongols, is going to allow it to live in peace, basically, allow it to, remain in the same way that it was before so that people can trade very safely back and forth. We got a bunch of different trade cities over there on the bottom left. So we got Beijing, Vijayanagar, Cairo, Hangzhou, Constantinople. Samarkand, which is right there in the middle, as well as Kashgar, are two of the biggest Western Chinese cities that were there doing all kinds of trade. We also can see the spread of religion here. So we can see Buddhism in particular is going to spread along the Silk Road. You can see it sort of going up from India all the way over to China all along the way. Same thing also with Islam will spread along this a bit too. So moving from one place to another. We're going to see also some technology from the Chinese like paper and gunpowder and other directions also. Yeah, so good stuff there. A couple of things to make sure you know, a couple of terms here over on the right. A couple of these are just sort of things that were transported, like compasses or rudders or junks. These are all things that made trade a little bit easier, more in the ocean kind of areas, but they're also important a little bit, at least the compass, to travel across the Silk Roads. One of these groups called the Sogdians, these are going to be people who are major traders. They're kind of right there in Central Asia, and we're an important group for that. We got flying cash, paper money is going to be important. They love talking about caravanserais. These are those sort of like motels almost along the route that people could stay in with their merchandise to help protect it. And then a couple more things down there at the bottom, things like champa rice and plague. But we'll get to a little bit more of that when we get a few more slides in. All right, let me know if you got questions. Silk Road. Next up, we got the Mongol Empire. Now, I usually teach this where we do all the empires or all the trade routes together, but this is the actual format that they did. So let's talk about the Mongols here, okay? Biggest movers and shakers of Unit 2, right? Most cultures assume that the Armageddon-style event that was happening to them was because of that. We went from the shores of Japan into Vietnam, India, into Eastern Europe, and almost made it to Africa. Focus more on the trade, ideas, disease, etc., that spread with the Mongols. So again, as far as like political structures and stuff, not very important. They don't establish a lasting political structure. But what they do is, on the other hand, create a powerful ability for things to move back and forth. So typically we have 4 different divisions at one point. We have the largest part to it, which is the Yuan dynasty, as created by Kublai Khan over there in the middle right. He is a grandson of Genghis Khan. Then we have Chagatai Khanate, Golden Horde, and the Ilkhanate. Golden Horde is the one that invades into Europe. The Ilkhanate is the one that ends the Abbasid Caliphate, along the way. Okay. Let's see what else. Genghis Khan adopted the Uyghur script because he wanted to have a new script for him. A couple of things, you can see the Khanate capitals. Karakoram is the traditional capital, but otherwise you can see Beijing, you can see Al Malik, Tabriz, Sarai for these. Also note over here the little winds that are over there. Those are the kamikaze or divine winds. When the Mongols tried to invade Japan, they were repulsed initially. They tried again, and they ended up being destroyed by a hurricane, essentially, or like a typhoon or whatever, that prevented them from doing a whole lot. Yeah, so there you go with all that. A couple of different examples over here on the right. I mean, you know, some of these are pretty easy. Horses, the bow. Temujin is the actual given name of Genghis Khan. Let's see, what else would be important over here? Some of these are places that they just can't capture, like the Khwarezmian Empire, for example, or Kiev and Rus, Kublai Khan, Pax Mongolica, etc. Yeah, so make sure you know the kind of basics here, like who was in charge, where are they going, and sort of the importance of the Mongols through the Pax Mongolica of allowing trade and concepts and ideas to travel back and forth. All right. Next up, exchange in the Indian Ocean, our overview here. We got one of the most overlooked of the trade routes. I like the name Monsoon Marketplace as well. That's what John Crean calls it. Arguably the most important. This is what the Europeans were trying to get a piece of during the Age of Discovery. It's a major avenue for belief systems, spices travelers, and just about everything else. So lots of stuff is moving through here. Remember, the way that this works, essentially, you can see the little winds that are down there on the map. Excuse me, essentially what's happening here is that there's a monsoon that sweeps down from one part in one direction and then goes back the other direction afterwards. So for part of the year, it's very easy to move from one place to another, but then you kind of get stuck there and you have to travel back the other direction. But because they were reliable winds, you had a good, reliable way to transport and move your stuff from place to place. That's what makes it so incredibly important. Guys over on the right are the same people we've talked about before. Zheng He, of course, does his famous trip. You can see it in the black there. You can see him coming down from China all the way through here. He makes it all the way over to Africa, to the Swahili city-states, which is pretty astonishing. Ibn Battuta then is traveling around as well because he just loves to travel everywhere. And Marco Polo is mostly up to the north, but he does actually get his way down here also. One of the things that they're transporting, of course, is religion. So we're going to have a lot of Hinduism is going to move from India all the way over to these other areas like the Khmer Empire. So the Khmer Empire actually was Hindu as well. But we're also going to see a lot of goods moving back and forth. So like lots of spices. You can see he's got a little picture of nutmeg down there. Lots of spices, pepper, spices, nutmeg, all that kind of stuff. Coffee is going to move around. Lots of those things are going to move from one direction to another, as was the compass and the astrolabe. All right. Oop, wait, let me go back. If we're looking here at these words over here to the right, again, it's a lot of little civilizations and things. So we got the Delhi Sultanate, we got Vijayanagara, Angkor Wat, Swahili Coast, all that kind of stuff, all over there. Diaspora, again, that's going to result from Chinese moving down to different places and taking over control of those places. Ibn Battuta, Zheng He, and others. Also, don't forget there is a slave trade along the Indian Ocean. It's not anywhere near as big as the one we'll see when the Europeans come, but there is some of that going specifically to the Arab countries as well. All right, getting close to it. Just a couple more of these. All right, Trans-Saharan Trade. Sahara Desert, big desert there, of course, in northern Africa. So Trans-Saharan Trade route is pretty easy to learn, as it says here, and even easier to see its massive impact. The route introduced sub-Sahara, south of Sahara, to the Afro-Eurasian trade routes. It brought Islam to Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, gold and salt to Europe and the Middle East, and of course, good old Mansa Musa. You can see his picture over there on the right, just above Ibn Battuta. So Mali is our most important of these places down here, though again, you can see the Hausa there as well. We also know that the Ethiopians involved in some of this trade, and of course, the Mamluks were one of the places that they traded through. So what they're going to be doing here then, of course, is they're going to be taking salt and gold from Mali in that area, as well as a few forest products. And they're going to move those north along the Trans-Saharan trade route towards the cities that are on the coast there near Europe. So they're going to go to Tunis, they're going to go to Fez, Tripoli, Cairo, and they are going to trade those things on to other areas. What are they getting in return? Well, in return, they're getting lots of finished goods and things coming from the north. So lots of like cloth and silks and things like that they would not have otherwise. So lots of gold, lots of copper, etc. They're also moving slaves. You can see the hands down there at the bottom. They're moving across the Hausa states, moving over towards the Muslim areas. That is where the slaves are moving in that direction. Okay. You can also see a couple of examples of caravanserai. So up there near Tripoli, we have one. Up there near Tunis, we have another one. Also near Cairo and Suakin. So those are all places where we're going to see these caravanserai, places where people can stop and make their way. One of the things, don't forget, that makes the whole thing possible is a camel saddle. It seems pretty simple, but it took a while for people to develop an effective camel saddle that they could use to move across the continent there. All right, over on the right again, we have some similar things. Mali Empire, we already talked about a bit, as well as the Mamluk Sultanate and others. The only thing on there to mention, a mosque, madrasa, these are, of course, religious places. Mosque is the religious worship center, whereas a madrasa is more like an education area, like a school or something. Otherwise, we talked about a couple of different ones, these caravanserais, camel caravans, etc. Right. Now, let's talk about cultural consequences. We'll talk about environmental consequences, and that will be what we are doing tonight. I've been talking. All right. our generic overview here. These sections seem skippable, but they're not really. They're going to tie everything together from before. Sometimes I teach these sort of in other ways, but these two sections are particularly important to this unit. Trade routes should almost be called cultural trade routes, right? People are trading stuff, but they're also moving culture around and stuff. So like you think about you're moving some gold, you go to another area to try to trade it off. You make a friend, maybe you talk to them about your religion, get them to change it or whatever, and then they move it on to other people as well. Religions, technologies, people, ideas are all going to move across these areas that are going to be important as well. So you can see here, Buddhism in particular, we talked about before, is going to spread. Hinduism down there in the south is going to spread over to Southeast Asia. Islam is going to move over towards the Middle East. And as well as Christianity and others. We have our three travelers there, Polo, Ibn Battuta, and Kemp moving around also. We're also going to have a number of ideas and things moving over. So we got gunpowder, we got print, we got compasses, we got paper, stuff like that, all going over to different places. Here's a kind of cool one, okay? So if you look at that little explosion in the middle of the map there, it is, I think it's kind of right on the border between, what is that, Uzbekistan, I think, and Afghanistan. That is called the Battle of Talas, which is an important battle. In 751, the Tong lost to the Abbasids there and transferred paper-making technology. So in that battle, they lost the secrets of paper-making to the Abbasids, and that will change that over time. Looking over at our right, then we got a couple of things we've talked about a bit before, but you know, Swahili is this language that is a combination language between Bantu languages as well as Islam. I'm sorry, as well as Arabic languages. Got Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Dar al Islam, the House of Islam. A couple of technologies here, Latin sails. Those are those sort of triangular shaped sails. Astrolabe compass, the stern rudder instead of using a side rudder. And then a couple of different names there and a couple other things that are being transferred. Okay, so cultural consequences. That thing up there in the top, by the way, is the Great Mosque of Jen, and it is an example of that, of the changes and stuff that we have, because that is an example of Islam making its way all the way down to Mali and in that area. All right, let's check out our last little bit here. Yeah, our last little bit here, which is environmental consequences, 1200 to 1450. Okay, along with those goods and technologies, we've got some environmental consequences, some of which are positive, some of which are very, very negative. So, for example, foods and disease is mainly what we're talking about here. Specifically, they're going to cite things like bananas. Okay, so bananas are going to move from Southeast Asia over to places in Africa. Who knew that they were not native to Africa? Excuse me, who knew they weren't native to Africa? But they're going to move across that way. We got good old champa rice, which is going to come from basically Vietnam. It's going to move north from there into China. It says they're a fast-growing rice that can grow 2 full crops per season. Citrus fruits, lemons, sour oranges, pomelos, things like that are going to move their way as well. Again, as it says here, they already had some of these citrus fruits, but these are like better citrus fruits. They grow faster and they have better things about them. But one of the biggest factors here is disease, really, right? So you can see all these good things moving over here. We got sugar bananas, champa rice, etc. These are going to help humans out a lot. Now, they do also have some negatives for humans too, of course, in the sense that when you have a lot of bananas, like local types of fruit or something, might be pushed to the side, which means in the long run, we're going to have less biological diversity. But at least in this time period, it's not that big of a deal. But one of the biggest factors here, though, is going to be bubonic plague, the movement of the bubonic plague or the Black Death. So we have 1334 CE, that's during the Mongols. Their connection around the world is going to cause the connection from this little area of China that had a disease. That disease starts getting into people who had no protection to it. It moves up then to Beijing. From Beijing, it transfers across within only a few years across Asia until finally it makes it to Constantinople in 1347. And of course, we know where that goes from there, right? Which is that all of Europe is inundated by this terrible disease, the bubonic plague, which is going to cause tons and tons of problems and kill a whole lot of people across Europe. Okay. All right, folks, that is what we got tonight. We're in there at 5:53 just to cover it. We'll be doing more of these next week. We'll be doing 3 and 4 from these. And again, don't forget to look for some of those videos I'm going to be posting up with some of my brick and mortar kids, okay? Hope you all are doing well. Don't forget to study. You got to do something on your own as well. You're going to be fantastic, but just make sure you are doing a little bit of practice on your own, okay? Hope to see some of you all at office hours if you have anything that I can help you with. Otherwise, y'all take care. Have a great week. Be good. Absolutely.